There it is. Well, hello and welcome to Uncorking a Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and today I'm excited to introduce you to Meg Stafford. Meg is a writer who loves exploration of all kinds, and this time she takes us along for the ride. I just butchered that. Let me just redo that. This happens all the time, and I don't know why. I think it's because I've got Super Bowl brain going on right now, um, which doesn't help.
It's pretty fun.
Here we go. Take two. Hello and welcome to Uncorking a Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and today I'm excited to introduce you to Meg Stafford. Meg is a writer who loves exploration of all kinds, and this time she takes us along for the ride. For 25 years, she's been observing how small, remarkable moments enrich our lives in her monthly newspaper column, A Moment's Notice. As a social worker in private practice, she's been helping others negotiate the terrain of relationships and connections for over 35 years. Her 2011 memoir, Topic of Cancer, Riding the Waves of the Big C, won 6 literary awards for its engrossing and hilarious portrayal of surviving and thriving after a life-altering diagnosis of breast cancer. She joins me today to talk about her life and latest book, Who Will Accompany You? My Mother-Daughter Journeys, Far From Home and Close to the Heart. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Meg.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, I'm very happy to have you here. But Meg, I'm going to start with the question I ask everybody as we begin, which is, Meg, where does your story as an author begin?
I would say that it began probably when I was really, really little, like 3 years old. I would make these little tiny books that I would tape together or staple together, and they'd be really simple. And my mom used to pride herself on the fact that she did not direct me and did not direct my spelling. So I just wrote out whatever I could, and I used to write these little stories all the time. And I was always interested all throughout my schooling, but it wasn't until I started writing the columns when I was actually in my 20s that I would say that my writing became more focused and published.
Yeah.
So I was doing that for a number of years, and I don't know that I would have aimed to write a book, except that during my experiences with breast cancer, I was writing to an email distribution list, and people started giving me feedback that they were learning what other people might have gone through but didn't talk about, or that there's a lot of jokes in there. They missed it when I wasn't writing, and that I should get it into book form. So I did that, and that sort of got me more thinking about writing as really being a writer. It really is so much a part of me that it's something I have to do. I love to do. So, and this one is the second one on my writing journey. So,
well, tell me, do you have any of those things that you were writing when you were 3 years old? Did your mother save any of those?
I saved a few of them in a little box. I am not certain where it is at the moment, but I definitely think I could go back and uncover them. But I remember one was something about my big red bed, and like it rhymes, and it's there. It's fun. It's fun to go back and.
So you always had a writer inside of you, but it only kind of went in your adult years. It came out. It sounds like a little bit later after you started writing this column. How did you land this column? I mean, it doesn't sound like you have a journalistic background. How did you land this column in the newspaper?
I decided that I actually worked with a career coach for a little while, and it became clear that writing was really important to me. And I was living in Somerville, Mass at the time, and I just approached the editor of the Somerville Journal and asked if I could write an op-ed, an editorial piece. And I essentially got carte blanche from there. So my first piece really dates me, was about getting an answering machine. And that was like, so, and then my next one, so I was in my mid to late 20s. The next one was about, I had received in the mail a flyer for prepaid funeral arrangements if you're a shut-in. And I just thought it was hilarious because it was the furthest thing from my mind. And so I wrote a piece about that. And then I ended up also writing a factual piece about it, but I could write about whatever I wanted, and sort of they would print whatever I wanted. And then when I moved out to the suburbs, I live in Littleton, Mass now. I approached my local paper here, and they essentially did the same thing. And I was writing for a few other places as well. So it's been a wonderful forum for me to write about my thoughts about a lot about parenting. I've been reviewing them lately, but about feet, about getting a pedicure, about some political things, some about music that I had been to hear. So it's been great to be able to write and get feedback from people.
Yeah, I do believe that like the writer's superpower isn't, their ability to pick out the exact right word or even put words on the page, but those things are important, don't get me wrong, but I think the real superpower is just having an experience or seeing something and then feeling compelled to write about it in a way that's interesting or motivating to somebody else. Like I think writers see the world slightly differently than most other people. So an experience that somebody has that they totally would forget about, seeing somebody on the train do something on the morning commute, might take the writer down like a completely different path, and turn that into something interesting. I mean, I did that for years with my own blogs, and I think it's such a cool place to start, kind of your
Very
writing
fun.
career. Yeah,
It's been an awesome outlet.
yeah. So I know we're going to talk about the new book, but take me back to that first book, Topic of Cancer. Because now, was this the first time you ever thought to yourself, "Hey, I'm going to write like a full-length book"?
Yes, and in fact, with both of these, each book had very different processes, and the next book will have yet another different process. But because the book was a lot written by the time I got to the idea of publishing it, excuse me, because they were, and the book really follows along in journalistic and journal form. But I first sent it to an editor to say, this was written for, it was a growing list of, it got up to about 80 or 90 people, but they were people who had some direct connection with me. So I had to make sure, would this be interesting to someone else? And she came back with a green light. So I decided to get it into book form and ultimately self-published because I was getting a lot of encouragement, but I wasn't getting an offer, and I needed to get it out there. And so I went the self-publishing route, and I'm really glad because it gave me the room to be able to focus on other things. And I was working at the same time as I am now. So as a psychotherapist, my other job.
Yeah.
But it's but I was really thrilled to get it out there because I got a lot of feedback, both from people who had gone through treatment and also a lot from people who either knew people or who have had family members or relatives, friends who had gone through it and weren't sure how to be helpful. But that's one of the things that it addresses is ways to really be helpful to people who are going through treatment. So, and as I said, it is really full of jokes and the quirky things. And if you're not okay with puns, stay away from that book because there's a lot of them. It was just whatever was happening in my mind at the time, including my daughters were in 7th and 12th grades, and so there was stuff happening with them, and it's all sort of in there. It was a part of my life. It never defined my life.
Yeah. So you self-published that first one. What this one that we're talking about today, was this self-published as well, or did this
It's
get the more?
hybrid. So
Okay.
this is with Greenleaf, and I had approached a number of places, but I chose them because they really understood what I was looking to do. I had one offer from a publisher who said, well, we can get this into one voice because I include both of my daughter's voices in each of the sections. And that was important to me because I wanted to go back and forth between each of our perspectives. So I knew that they weren't going to be right because they were not understanding where I was coming from, but Greenleaf totally embraced it and were a really wonderful partner to work with.
Yeah, it sounds like they shared more of your vision as an author than
Yes.
perhaps the other one. Um, well, tell me, what can you share with us about Who Will Accompany You? My mother-daughter journeys far from home and close to the heart.
Right. So this was inspired initially by a trip that I took with my younger daughter when she was 17 and doing her senior project for school. And she was doing it on the question, what is happiness? Small topic. But decided that she wanted to study meditation in Buddhism at a monastery in Kathmandu. And we decided that we couldn't just pop her on a plane to the other side of the world and say, I hope someone picks you up. And so I took that as an opportunity to go too. And I trekked to the Annapurna base camp while she was studying meditation at the monastery. And my first idea for the book was to go back and forth between each of our perspectives, because even though she was sitting meditating formally, I wasn't sitting, I was trekking, but it was very meditative because it was early in the season and we were spending lots of hours by ourselves or on our own. And then I realized that it wasn't enough. And my older daughter went to the country of Colombia and spent a year and a half there as an observer witness. And I went to visit her for a week. And it felt really important to include her journey and our time together there. And so that's the second portion of the book, where she lived in the far northwestern corner of the country for 9 months and then in Bogota for 9 months. But I visited her there where it was a 45-minute open air Jeep ride and an hour and a half hike to get to the community that she was living in. So it was really an experience to visit.
That
And then the last section is called Home, and it's about where does my husband fit in? How do we come to travel? It ties it all together, and a lot of people like that as well.
So your younger daughter was the one who went to Kathmandu.
Correct.
Now, was that part of a high school experience?
That she created.
Okay.
So they both went to a charter school, public charter school nearby, and they have a senior project which takes most of the year. And there's a research portion of it. There is a presentation part of it, community service part of it. But they encourage kids, if they want to spend time off campus. So it's encouraged to travel. And she took that as an opportunity to go somewhere really far, which was part of the challenge for her, to go somewhere new and unexplored, because our older daughter had already spent time in Costa Rica and a semester in Chile and Argentina, and so our younger daughter was wanting to explore as well.
Yeah, I'm
So
sure. I mean, when I was in high school, I got to go to Boston.
that's a trip. I went there in college and didn't move here until graduate school, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, as kind of going through these writing journeys and writing now 2 full-length books, and it sounds like there's a third in the works. What have you learned about yourself, kind of going through these writing projects?
Hmm. That I can't do it by myself. That's always a big one, because it's like, I want to do everything by myself. But it's probably my biggest takeaway during my whole cancer experience and the writing of the book was that I can't do it by myself. And that not only is it important to let other people in, but it makes it possible. And that I want to honor and appreciate all the help. But absolutely, in the writing process, the editing help is really key. In the first book, I needed help to know what else needed to be put into it so that people could understand the setting and the background, and what else do you need to know about me or my family for it to make sense. And with this one, because it was like putting together a mosaic, because I needed to balance my younger daughter's voice and mine in the first section, and then my older daughter's voice and mine in the second section. Um, and it was tricky to do that. Um, that's one thing, is learned that I need help to do it well, which is important. Also, this was not new news to me, but patience, not my longest and strongest suit. Like, I want it to happen now. I want it to get rolling. And some things just can't be pushed or rushed. And um, that's a really important lesson for me, always to know that things will get there in the time that they need. And there's only so far that I can move it at any one given time. So,
I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there from people who have not written a book, that writing is this solitary process where you are kind of locked away in a cabin for 6 months or 12 months or however long it is.
right.
And then all of a sudden your book comes out. But the collaboration, required during the writing process is, I mean, it's really tremendous between, working with editors, publishers, maybe beta readers, if that's the case,
Right.
going through
Absolutely.
different rounds of editing, really is a collaborative process, probably more so than people think.
Absolutely. And design, I mean, this is the cover,
Yeah.
which I love the designer who I worked with from the Greenleaf team, who presented me with 5 different options. And this was the one that I chose, but we continued to tweak it. I had some ideas about part of the way that it was, part of the way it appeared, that I wanted to change, and she did that, but like that didn't quite do it, and but I added one little piece at the bottom. But so there are lots of aspects that require other people. Thank goodness.
Mhm.
But you're right. Some parts are solitary, but a lot with
Oh,
others.
absolutely. I mean, there is a big chunk where you're just kind of by yourself with your thoughts, and you're planning and you're writing and you're doing all that, but it nothing comes together to get published without a collaborative effort.
Yeah, lots of other eyes on it.
Another thought I have, you are a therapist, you work in private practice. It sounds like you've been doing this for over 35 years. Have you
Basically.
found
Right.
it's probably scary to hear that number, right?
It's scary. Right.
But have you found that writing is therapeutic for you?
Absolutely. And that's where, with my first book, um, I needed to write to get it out of my system. In When you're in the process of getting diagnosed, for cancer, or for many things, there are often many tests and many different kinds of visits that happen. And it was really important to me to be able to tell people about it who wanted to know. I was happy to tell people, but it made me nuts to repeat something over and over again. So it was really great for me to like have an appointment and then be able to write about it and send it out. And some people would write back. Some people would write back like almost every time. There were people who never wrote back. There were people who read every word. There were people who would skim it, and like all of it was fine. But it was important for me to get it out, because then I was never sitting with it. If it was funny, I put that out there. If it was upsetting, I put that out there. So the book really is a reflection in real time of what it was like to go through that process, but absolutely therapeutic. But even I went to an amazing concert on Saturday night, and it blew my mind, and I knew that I had to write about it. Just, it's a way for me to absorb an experience, no matter what it's like. So and it's fun to, when people write back. Or one of the I wrote about a concert that I went to a few months ago and sent it to Groton Hill. It's a new place near us that will be like Tanglewood, but um, I sent it to them. They posted it on their Facebook page, and a violinist from the orchestra who plays there, excuse me, contacted me and asked if I would attend a concert of hers that is in preparation for a festival that she creates for people who don't have the money to fund themselves. So it was really exciting that that came out of it.
No, that's so cool. That's so cool. So it sounds like it was some kind of classical music.
Uh, the first one was the one the other night was a jazz pianist named Matthew Whitaker, who just blew our minds. It's he's 22, and so this was the first time that we had heard him, or didn't know of him except looking on their site. And he just has so much joy and energy. He's a prodigy, but his facility with the instrument, he was playing on a grand piano with an electric keyboard above it and an organ behind him so that he could just pivot in his chair. And he was playing on all three, and he had four other pieces. But so some jazz standards, some compositions of his own, but the exuberance that he played with just was infectious and just made you happy to be at the performance. And so like I had to get that out. I had to get it down while I was still responding to it and feeling it.
Yeah, I this past summer I got to see Billy Joel at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
And I broke down crying at like 3 or 4 separate times during the show.
Mhm.
And then I remembered that night I went back to, I was staying in New York. I went back to my hotel and I just wrote about it.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
because I needed to get it out. It's like just as
Yep.
those tears needed to come out,
Yep.
I needed to get these words out and then I could sleep.
Yep.
It's one of
Exactly.
those.
I wasn't sure that I wrote, that's part of what I read. I wasn't sure I'd be able to sleep. Uh, I was, but had to write it the next day. And it was the amount of energy that he put out for that concert was just, I can't imagine the level of, well, just energy that it took, and a lot for the audience to keep up. But I the same thing the next day. I had to get it out before I could do other things.
Yeah.
And that I love that. Sometimes if I'm taking a long bike ride, I'm composing in my head, like it's and so by the time I get pen to paper, which is typically the way I start, it's writing itself.
Yeah, I mean, writing doesn't always happen when you're in front of a screen or writing, on a pad of paper. It happens on long walks, for me, or bike rides.
Absolutely.
For
Yep.
me, it's long runs.
Mhm.
I'll just start thinking about a scene in my head, and then all of a sudden it'll just start kind of. And my problem is, if I'm on a long run, I have no way to capture anything that I'm thinking, so I have to hope that I remember it by the time I get back to my house.
I have not done this, but because same, if I'm riding 25 miles, it's like I'm not going to be home for an hour and a half. People have said that people have suggested using the notes function on your phone if you have it with you. It's that you could at least record a few words if you carry your phone when you run.
Right. Right. One more thing I want to talk about before I get to some fun questions is vulnerability. And I mean, about vulnerability, how important it is, especially in the therapy process, right? You've
Mhm.
got to be vulnerable or you're not doing it right, probably. But there's a certain amount of vulnerability in writing, especially what you're writing. I mean, you wrote a book about, cancer, you're writing a book about these trips with your daughters. These are nonfiction. And of course you might be worried, hey, what will my daughters think about these experiences that I'm writing about? Did that come into play for you at all, kind of thinking about your daughter's reactions to especially this latest book? Who Will Accompany You?
Well, I certainly consulted them and wanted to make sure that they were okay with everything that was in the book. And I had to prod them a little bit to, to read through the whole thing. I mean, they knew the material that I was using because Kate was keeping a journal while she was at the monastery and while we were in Bhutan. So she allowed me to use that. And Gail was writing emails home, and also she wrote a blog because she really needed to process that experience. So I used pieces of that so they knew what I was using, but also in the parts that I created, I wanted to make sure that they were okay with it. So they each had um, some small edits that everyone I altered. Some were small points, but it all matters. I wanted it to be well represented. So they were okay with whatever was in the final version.
Yeah.
And then when I did the audiobook, I recorded the first one myself. Someone else recorded this one again. They gave me 8 choices um, of readers, and she asked pronunciation of some of the places that would be impossible to know otherwise. But then there were some of the Spanish ones that were not obvious that she didn't have right, but I wanted to go back to make sure that they were correct, like the places where Gail was living, because again, it's about being respectful to the people involved. So it took a little bit of doing and paying attention, but we got there.
You got there. You got there. Well, we got to the point in our show where we're asked some fun questions. Just this is all in the line of uncorking your story even more. I do that sometimes in many ways through pop culture. So I'm curious,
Mhm.
Meg, when you were growing up, what were some of your favorite TV shows, if you had any?
So I fortunately watched an interview the other night.
Oh, you
So I
cheated.
knew that I cheated, thank goodness, because otherwise I might just be like, I don't remember. So I like jotted down a few of them from early on. Early, I loved The Addams Family, was a favorite. I used to be, as a kid, I was annoyed. My dad was a musician, and we would go to his classical concerts, and it would mean pulling me away from the Addams Family, which that was not, I was not happy about that, which is pretty funny. But I loved Action Mannix, the Ironside, some of the mystery stories, the game shows, Jeopardy, Let's Make a Deal. Um, I loved Dark Shadows when I was in grade school, some of that vampire stuff. And I love to watch sports. It's something I would enjoy watching with my dad. Football, baseball, basketball, all of it. I was not a huge TV watcher, though. I was out on the tennis court. I was biking, doing other stuff.
Yeah. You mentioned like mysteries and Mannix. What's your take, if you have one, on Columbo?
Oh, he was fun. that was that was another one. That was that sort of the intellectual mystery solver. I
Yeah.
love mysteries, so
I
watch them.
always I always thought that was a cool show because, most mysteries, you don't know who does it until the end. But with Columbo, they tell you in the first like 5 or 10 minutes who did it. And then it's just the fun is watching him sort of figure it
Find
out.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I'd forgotten that
I always
aspect of it, but
I always like that. And Adam's Family over the Munsters, I take it, right? I mean,
Addams Family over the Munsters, right? I did a little bit of Munsters, but it really couldn't hold a candle to Addams
no. I
Family.
mean, it was like the way I think about it, if the Adams Family was an Oreo, the Munsters were the Hydrox, right? It's almost like the knockoff to the
Uh,
and it is quite possible that Hydrox came out first. I have no idea, but I'm just going by reputation here.
it's a good way to think about it.
Why? I know it sounds like you're a music type person. What when you were growing up, what kind of music were you listening to?
So a lot, well, the classical that my dad would play in, but he also was a jazz um, musician, and he started the jazz program where he taught at New Paltz College. So I grew up listening to Miles Davis and Oscar Peterson, Ella Fitzgerald, all Sarah Vaughan, all the jazz greats. But I also loved Steely Dan, Bruce Springsteen, Billy Joel, Elton John, the Taylors. I think the very first concert I went to was Livingston Taylor, who is James's brother and never was as famous, but has also a very long career. Crosby, Stills and Nash, all the Bonnie Raitt, all the
Yeah, all those like
all the
singer
great
songwriter singers.
Stones.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so cool. I
Beatles,
know.
of course. Uh,
I know you mentioned Tanglewood. I know James Taylor. That's one of his regular touring spots, if I'm not mistaken.
right. No, you're right. Yeah, I have never seen him. I've never seen him live, actually, but I know that he plays there pretty regularly. I think that'd be a treat. One of the one of the radio shows that I listen to often plays very unusual music. It's a jazz show, so they play some of the jazzier things that he has sung, which is really interesting because it's just not the stuff that you tend to hear all the time. But
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
fun. So,
So I know you certainly have a career as a writer and as a therapist. What other career hat would you like to try if you could? Any other career out there that you'd like to try?
ooh, um, it's an interesting question because I often like to play the game with myself of can I do that job? And there are some that I know without a doubt that I am totally not only unqualified for but unfit for. And then there are others that, oh, maybe I could do that if I had the training or had the time. Um, and what would it be now? So I think journalism actually is one that I might want to, that I had, if I were to rewind, maybe I would have gone in that direction. And I've written a few pieces over the years, although uh, the the editorials, the op-eds are really the things that that's really my heart. I love
Yeah,
doing that most. And that's my next book actually, is going to be a compilation of the columns that I've written over the last 35 years, with pieces to tee them up in between. So I'm working on that with my editor. But some of the other things, I mean, I love being outdoors. I don't know if I would ever have wanted to be a guide in for places, but um, that's tough. Or if I would have ever done a professional sport, I don't know. That's it's an interesting thought.
yeah. So you've got two books now. It sounds like, I mean, you are working on a third. Any lessons about sort of writing, these bigger pieces, longer form content that you feel like you learned the hard way, whether it's the writing process or the publishing process?
Um, the publishing and the marketing process, I think for me, that's been the toughest nut, is even though they've both had some recognition and awards, that still is not the thing that gets it out there. So I'm learning more about that. Also takes patience and time and working with other people to find the ways that gets it into bookstores, into like, how do I set up things like this? How do I, what kind of help do I need to do that? So that part was, even with the first time around, knowing that that was true, I still underestimated the amount of effort that really needs to go into the publicity side of it. Because I still remember reading what someone wrote about, like, you can have a gem in a room, but if the room is dark, you can't see it. So what do you need to do to shine a light on something so that people know it's there, so people know it's accessible.
Yeah,
So
yeah, you're so right. You could have the greatest book in the world, but if you can't figure out a way to tell people that it exists, then you know,
right, how do they know? Right.
yeah,
what
it's true.
what are your favorite ways?
Oh, of getting the word out. You know, gosh, it's so funny. I've spent 25 years working in marketing, and I have the hardest time marketing my own work. It's so hard. But I mean, doing things like this, like just showing up on other people's podcasts is a great way of doing it. Um, and then honestly, since I've got control over all of my work, I running promotions really does help. Um,
Huh.
you know, the price
Yep.
promotions, and then of
Yep.
course telling people that things are on promotion is very important too.
Right. That.
Um, but that, I mean, that does it. And even just kind of running this show, I mean, you know, people come to listen to, you know, the authors talk, but then, you know, they wind up at my website and see the
Right.
stuff that I've done. So that helps. I mean, everything helps, but the headline is you have to do something. You have to,
Right.
you've got to, and
Right.
it's constantly, you know, you constantly have to be doing something. You know, and hopefully, you know, something that you publish, you know, this year, you know, helps move a couple back catalog sales. You know, and that certainly happens. That certainly helps. But
Absolutely. Some of the authors that I have met, it may be their most recent book, which I'm learning about, but absolutely, if I enjoy it, I'm going back to read all their other stuff
yeah,
also.
it's
So,
cool when you get a comment like that on Goodreads or an Amazon review or something where they say, "Wow, this is so great! I can't wait to read more of their stuff," which is a great compliment. Um,
absolutely.
I know we are running out of time here. I do want to ask one final question for you, which is if you can go back in time and whisper some words of advice into, you know, maybe it's that 3-year old who was writing her books and binding them together. I'm picturing, you know, construction paper and yarn, but that's just me. Um,
Just
what what
a little, right.
what words of advice would you give the younger Meg?
Um, Definitely to keep doing it, to let it out, to um, to make sure to give it the time that it needs, and to stay with it, to listen to the voice that has something to say, and continue to encourage her to get it out there, because
Yeah,
it is a very circuitous path to uh, to getting it published, but it is worth it,
that's
and
right.
it's this the satisfaction is tremendous. And um, I love thinking about how far it could go and what people it might reach, um, and none of it would happen if it isn't out there. So just to perseverance, very big in the publishing world.
Oh yes, you mentioned it before. Perseverance, persistence. Those are, you know, 2 P's along with publishing. So there you go, 3 P's. Uh, we should come up with four just
Peas
to
in a
make.
pod, three peas in a pod.
That's right. Well, Meg, tell me, where can people buy Who Will Accompany You, My Mother-Daughter Journeys, Far From Home and Close to the Heart?
On Amazon or Barnes and Noble, any of the major platforms.
All right. And if people want to learn more about you, do you have a website, social media handles you want to share?
So www.megstafford.com will take you right to my website, and all my blog is on there. So lots of the pieces that I've written over the years are there, as well as www.whowillaccompany.you.com will take you right to this most recent book and provide links to get there. And um, Instagram is one of the things that I want to build up. And so Meg Stafford 2183. And on Facebook, it's Meg Stafford. So
Very good, Meg. I will be sure to put all of that in the show notes for listeners to just go on their phones or whatever they're listening to this on and looking up those links easily enough. Meg, thank you for stopping by Uncorking a Story and letting me uncork yours.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been really great.